Okay, grade 7, this is your chapter 4.2, decimals and percentages review from MathLinks 7, section 4.2. So the first review question says 1/3 as a decimal is 0.3, true or false? So this one should be one you know without a calculator, but if you didn't know, you could pull up your calculator and say, how do I change this fraction to a decimal? And we know that we divide the numerator by the denominator, 1 divided by 3. And when we press equals, we actually get this number, 0.333333, repeating to infinity, which is not this number, but actually this number here. What we do to signify what's called a repeating decimal is this digit repeats to infinity. And rather than write 3's forever, in math we have a thing called bar notation, which we take the number that repeats and put a bar above it. So for question 2, it says 0.22 as a fraction in lowest terms is 11/50. Well, this one's interesting because you could do it, there goes the bell, either with a calculator or without a calculator. So if you say, well, what is this decimal, 0.22? Well, it's actually 22 hundredths, right? And when I say 22 hundredths, because I know my place for that's tenths, that's hundredths, I can then change it to a fraction as 22 hundredths. This number here and this number here are the exact same thing. So when I reduce a fraction to lowest terms, I have to find a factor that's both common into the numerator and denominator. In this case, since both of them are even, 22 is an even number and 100 is an even number, I can divide both by 2, and I would get 11/50. And that is in lowest terms, right? 11/50. So this as a fraction in lowest terms is 11/50. The answer is true. That is true. It's 11/50. Question 3, a good estimation for 22/53 is 0.3. Well, if we think about this, this is pretty close to 22 out of 50, we would say. So if you had 22 out of 53, or if you had 22 out of 50, they're both fairly close as a fraction. This one, if I was to think without a calculator, what is it estimated? Well, this is, since it's an estimation, I multiply both by 2, I would get 44 out of 100, which is roughly 44%. This one is 30%. So 44% versus 30%, is it a good estimation? Not really. So we can probably say false. It's not a great estimation. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not great. Question 4, 0.2 is approximately equal to, that's what that means, 2%. Well, if we think about 0.2, that is really 2/10, which is really 20%, not 2%. So is it close to 2%? No, it's not. So the answer is false. Question 5, 0.026 is less than 22%. Well, if we think about what is this as a fraction, this is 26 thousandths, which is, if I change it to a fraction with a denominator of 10, I would divide 1,000 by 10 to get 100, and I get 2.6 out of 100, which is 2.6%. So then I have to go back to my question and say, well, is 2.6% less than 22%? The answer is yes, so therefore it's true. Okay, so just took a pause there for a second. So if we look at 27 out of 33, it says express it as a decimal rounded to the nearest thousandth. So because this is a denominator that I can't easily multiply to get 100, 33 times something is not 100. What I want to do is I want to use my division again. So I'm going to go 27 divided by 33. So think of this question as being 27 divided by 33 to change it to a decimal. In this case, I get 0.818181 forever. But it says rounded to the nearest thousandth. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths. There we are with the thousandths. Now the question is this going to be 0.818 or is it going to be 0.819? That's really the question. When I have to round it to the nearest thousandth, I have to determine which one this is closer to. Since this number is less than 5, that means that will be my rounded answer. I will not make this last digit go up. I will keep it the same. If this number had have been a 5, then I would have used this number because I would have changed this to a 9 and made it 819. But the answer is 0.818. Question 7, 1/45th rounded to the nearest 10,000. So again, I'm going to take my calculator and I'm going to go 1 divided by 45, and I'm going to get 0.02222. It says rounded to the nearest thousandth, so there's my tenths, hundredths, thousandths. This is a 2, which means that the other 2 will stay the same. So my answer is going to be 0.022. Question 8, rounded to the nearest thousandth. Take my fraction 203 divided by 403 is 0.503722, etc. And in this case, if I round it to the nearest thousandth, it's going to become 0.04 because this number here is now greater than 5. So this 3 is going to go up to become 0.53. It was 504 instead of 503. That's your answer. Question 9, 2 out of 25th, 5. Now this one I don't need a calculator for, and I'll explain why. If you multiply both the numerator and denominator by 4, you create a fraction that is a base 10 denominator, or 100, a 10, 100, or 1,000, or a 10,000 denominator. Because it's that, I can then read it as being 8 hundredths, and I can then write it as a decimal as being 0 decimal, no tenths, 8 hundredths. But it says rounded to the nearest tenth. So there's my tenths place. Is this 8 going to make it go up or stay the same? And the answer is it's going to go up. So therefore, it's approximately equal to 0.1. And that's your answer for 2/25ths rounded to the nearest tenth. Question 10. 6 divided by 999. Take my calculator. 6 divided by 999 is 0.00600. That's an interesting one. Round to the nearest hundredth. There are my hundredths, which means this one is going to go up. Instead of being 0, 0, it's going to be 0, 1. Now, if this number had been a 3 instead of a 6, then my answer would have been 0.00, or just 0. But because it said rounded to the nearest hundredth, it's going to be 0.01. That's your answer. Question 11, what is 0.28 as a fraction? Well, this is 28 hundredths, which is 28 hundredths. Now, to reduce it to lowest terms, you need to be able to figure out what number is divisible into both numerator and denominator. 28 and 100 are both even, which means 2 is a factor of both. Now we get 14/50th. Now remember, this equal sign between them means that this fraction and this fraction have the same value. And we could figure that out by taking a calculator. If I go 28 divided by 100 and press equals, it says it's 0.28. If I go, what is 14 divided by 50? It says 0.28. These are equivalent fractions, which means they have the same value, but they're different size pieces. If I was to then divide this by 2 again, I get 7/25ths, which is the answer in lowest terms. And if I take that calculator one final time and go, what is 7 divided by 25? It still says it's 0.28. Question 12, this is 8 tenths, right? This is 8 tenths. Therefore, as a fraction in lowest terms, both are even numbers, so you can divide by 2, you get 4/5. And the final question, I think it's the final question, question 13, or maybe it's the second last question. What is this number as a fraction in lowest terms? Well, it's 2 hundredths, which in lowest terms is 1/50th. And the actual last question, what is this one? This is 84 thousandths, which is 84 over 1,000, which is divisible by 2 to get you 42 out of 500, which is still not lowest terms. It's 21 out of 250. That is your answer as a fraction in lowest terms. Okay, hopefully that was okay and helpful. Tomorrow we're going to go over it one last time, and if you have any questions, ask them when you see me tomorrow.